Hi everyone, I'm super excited today to be here with Abigail today. It's a little bit different than my normal interviews. Abigail has got something different to share. So she's a health coach and she specializes in people who are having problems with their gut, mostly around gluten, but I'll let her explain a little bit more around it. Hi Abigail, how are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to share your journey with us. I think it's a very important subject to talk about. Gluten. Myself don't eat an enormous amount of gluten anymore, and any gluten that I eat is homemade. So tell us a little bit more about how did you get here? How did you become a health coach?
Well, I guess you can say it started really young. I got into health coaching specifically about 3 years ago, but much earlier than that, I became interested in health because my sister that's right under me has been very sick for all of her life, and we didn't know why. She was bedridden when she was 11 to 13. She didn't have energy to do anything. She would sleep for 14, 16 hours at a time and still just be exhausted. She couldn't do anything. She would try to like get up and do things, and then she couldn't hold her head up and she'd have to lay back down again, and just complete skeletal muscle exhaustion. And my mom was a nurse's assistant, so she knows what it's like when you start getting into the medical system and they send you for test after test after test. And so she was just hoping that, my sister would get better and we wouldn't have to deal with it, but she just got worse. So mom finally decided to take her to some doctors, and we did test after test after test, and she had scans and MRIs and blood tests and everything they could think of, and all of the tests came back and they said everything comes back as normal, she's fine. And yet here's this teenage girl literally too exhausted to do anything. Her back always is out of place, her neck is always out of place, she has headaches, she can't move. All of her joints we call them loose joints, like they won't stay in place. And some of the doctors went as far as to say that she must be having mental issues, because obviously it was all in her head, and maybe she was just anorexic and we didn't want to admit it. And we all knew that she was worried, distraught about how underweight she was, and it was definitely not anorexia. And so this went on until the last couple of years ago when I started health coach school, and I was doing the lessons on gluten sensitivity and celiac disease. And there was this one lecture where this lady who has celiac disease was explaining her journey in how she got a diagnosis and all of the symptoms that she had, and everything she was saying, I was like, that's exactly what my sister has.
Oh my God.
Problems with her teeth, problems with her skin, problems with her hair, just feeling like there's poison inside trying to come out of her. And so I called my sister in to watch this lecture with me, and like we both started crying because we knew that's what she had, and none of the doctors had ever thought of it as an option, much less to check for it. So
she literally, by the time you were in like starting to be a health coach, she had gone through, from when she was 11, she was still not well, and there was no kind of resolution. She just kept kind of trying to.
She's kept herself alive by sheer willpower.
Wow.
Yeah. So because of what I learned in school and I was able to share with her, she went gluten-free. So my my initial reason to become a health coach was just because I was fascinated with health and I wanted to learn something to help her. And then through school, I was actually able to do that, which is like super cool, because I didn't even remember that I'd said that I would do whatever it took to help her until we found that lecture, and then it all came back. And so now I help people with celiac disease and with gluten sensitivity because I lived it with her, and I know exactly what happens mentally and emotionally and physically, and I don't want anybody else to have to go through that alone. So it's tough and it's a process, and she's still working through the damage that she took to her systems from not knowing for so long. But at least now we know what it is, and we can have a plan to do something about it.
So the doctors never tested her for any allergies or anything like food allergies? No.
They did test her for allergies. She wasn't allergic, so they said she was fine.
Okay.
And one of the doctors suggested that she might have a gluten sensitivity, but it wasn't ever mentioned that it was as serious as celiac disease.
Right. And so they never tested her for the celiac disease. They just test her for kind of food. Yeah. So it's a completely different test, right? So you have to test for the celiac disease separately, and then the food allergies, you know, I believe that you can choose, you know, X amount of things if you want to, and you have to do them at a time, right? So you can't do them all at once. And can you explain that a little bit about, you know, the gluten sensitivity? Because I know, you know, there's many people out there that they are tested negative to the celiac disease, but and then what happens then?
So the thing about tests are they're very much based on a broad spectrum of people and what is considered normal, but what is healthy for an individual person can be much different than an average. So even though the tests all came back as my sister was normal, obviously she wasn't. So the test did not have the whole picture. So celiac disease, I think of it like a spectrum. So a lot of people are going gluten-free. Most mainstream people still consider it a fad, and they think it's just a weird weight loss thing. But more and more people are realizing that they are actually sensitive to it. And the thing about gluten sensitivity is there isn't a test for it. Mm-hmm. There's only an elimination diet, and then you see if you feel better. So gluten sensitivity is patient diagnosed. They have to say, I feel better without it. Celiac disease is an autoimmune disease. And so there are genetic markers, and then there are physical symptoms. Yeah, but also like when they have, so the main thing that lets you know is if they do an endoscopy of the small intestine, because the villi of the small intestine are broken down and destroyed when a person has celiac disease. And so that's like one of the main physical proof, I guess you could say, proof that it's actually celiac disease and not gluten sensitivity. So the physical reasons why these are classified as different things is on a spectrum of sensitivity, but the end result is the same. A person with gluten sensitivity and a person with celiac disease both need to be gluten-free. So even though they have different physical aspects, the thing that helps them is the same.
And so when your sister was going through all of that, like, how would you describe your diet at home?
It was very much based in processed, boxed, canned things. There was a lot of unnecessary carbs. My mom did the best she could with what she had, and we didn't have a lot of choices growing up, so we just had to eat what we had. It was a lot of chicken. Mom says she's surprised we didn't grow feathers because of all the chicken we ate, but a lot of chicken and pasta, and we didn't eat a lot of sweets, but there were a lot of sweet things because you don't think about like pasta being sweet, but it is
just a lot of carbs that
sugar.
Became sweet.
Yeah. So a lot of that, most of the vegetables we had were either canned or frozen, so they weren't as they weren't as fresh, so they lost some of their nutritional content at that point. So yeah, it was just kind of a standard American diet.
Standard American diet. Yeah, that it's being rolled out all around the world. No, I don't think it's only in America that, I think that, when I go to the supermarket, often I, look at people's trolleys and I am horrified. I remember the first time I went to the supermarket because I was during my cancer treatment. I stayed at home because I didn't want to get sick and I got coughs and colds. And I stayed at home for a good 5 months, not leaving the house. And I remember that first time I went to the supermarket. I looked at the supermarket and it was a scary experience because I had been in this little cave where I was creating this like little healthy world around me where, my husband would just buy, like fruits and vegetables and pulses and healthy grains and less things in packages and boxes, and all of a sudden I go into the supermarket and I go through the first aisle and it was like sugar, like chemicals, and it was just like, whoa, and it was a realization that one, if you don't really know, if you're not really aware, it's really hard to go to the supermarket and come out with a healthy trolley. That is
yeah,
really,
they make it hard on purpose.
Exactly. It's like literally, I said, for somebody to have the discipline to come to this place and come out with a healthy trolley, they need to go around the edges and just get the fruit and veggies, and the stuff in the fridge if you need, and then go to the checkout, because you just can't. It's like impossible. And unfortunately, until we need, I think we live in a society that until we need to change our habits, and because we are unwell or we get sick, we just follow this whole thing that everybody else does, right? Because we are busy.
It's just normal.
Exactly. So it was quite an interesting experience for me. It was quite of a shocking experience and quite confronting to see that this is what we accept as normal for us. We can't see any other way unless we need to. And sometimes, which really breaks my heart, is that sometimes even when we understand and we know that those things are not doing ourselves any good, we still keep eating them and we still keep doing them and keep making our bodies even sicker. So how was the transition like from obviously when your sister had that diagnosis finally, like you are celiac? How was the transition from being not gluten-free to being gluten-free?
Well, she had actually tried being gluten-free for a little while before, because finally one of the doctors that we went to was a naturopath, and he suggested that she should try that. So she had been gluten-free, meaning that she wasn't eating things that contained gluten naturally. Like she wasn't eating bread, she wasn't eating pasta. So anything that obviously had wheat in it, she wasn't eating. But because she was actually celiac, and they're very sensitive to any trace amounts, she was still sick because we hadn't cut out every trace of gluten. So she already felt like she was a freak. She already felt like she wasn't normal because she wasn't allowed to eat what everybody else was eating. So the thought of, in a way it was hard, but it was also easier because she'd already gone through that mental process of realizing that I'm just going to have to be different, and that's just the way it is. So once she realized that it was that she was that sensitive, that celiac is that intense, then she has since then done everything possible to avoid even the trace amounts of gluten. So she ate a lot of tuna and peanut butter and bananas, because those were the only thing that she knew for sure didn't have gluten, wasn't going to include gluten in the packaging and everything. And so her diet went very, very narrow, which I think is what most people are concerned about, because they're like, I can only eat 3 things, so I'm just going to have to eat tuna and peanut butter for the rest of my life. And they have like cans of tuna stashed under their bed for the apocalypse, because you just don't know if you're ever going to have food again. And like, there's a lot of mental paranoia that goes along with this disease. So now that she's had, basically she had to just eat what she knew she could until her brain cleared enough to think about it. And once she was able to think about it, and once I was trained enough to know what to do to help her, then she's branched out into fresh fruits and vegetables, and she'll make, she's actually married now, so she'll make cookies for her husband, but they're always gluten-free cookies. And you know, she's not on a diet, she's just trying to eat everything as healthy as she can, because she doesn't want to have to think about other diet things. It's just, this is now the way I eat, which is different than being on a diet. So it was a difficult transition when she first went gluten-free as a teenager, but now she's done it long enough that it's not as big of a deal.
So do you feel that there is still that kind of, mindset shift around this whole, I need to, especially maybe at a younger age, like I'm much older than you, but if you say to your friends, like, I'm gluten-free, would the people go like, oh, you're on a diet or something like that? Because there's so much more awareness now. Like, I think there's so many, people finding out that they are gluten sensitive, for example, and they're trying to, and there's so many more recipes you can find online. There's so many more products available, like coconut flour, almond meal, like things that you can like bake. I know I always, bake my cakes. They're all gluten-free for my kids, so they don't even know any different.
Well, there's definitely still people who assume that it's just a weird fad thing, and that you're just being extra, or you're high maintenance, and basically just give it a rest. And that's one of the main things that I feel like the gluten-free community / industry doesn't do a great job of addressing, because this is diplomacy, and when people are hurt physically and they're scared, they're not the most diplomatic. So then you end up with families where somebody needs to be gluten-free or they will be sick. It's not a fad choice, it's medically necessary. And then family members who are like, well, you could eat it 2 weeks ago, so why is this a problem now? And there's definitely a lot of issues around that, and that's one of the main things that I focus on helping people with, because like our family was completely supportive of my sister doing whatever she needed to, but even we were like, does this mean that we have to be gluten-free now? This seems like a lot of work. There's a lot of relational aspects to it that can be very tricky to navigate. But as far as like society as a whole, I think there is a lot more awareness now that this is actually a medical thing, and it's not just a random choice that somebody does. So there is still a long way to go. as far as people being kind about it, but some people are going to be jerks about stuff no matter what. So
I know, exactly.
It really depends on the people that you're around.
And through your studies, I read a lot about glyphosate and all the chemicals they're putting on our produce, and especially in the process of making flour, and because it's one of the crops that it's made in mass and everywhere, a lot in America as well. Do you guys don't discuss things like that at school, that it is, I believe from everything that I read that the gluten is definitely, we went from not eating much to now everything has got gluten in it, which is now our guts are not equipped to put up with all this gluten. And on top of that, if the gluten is coming full of chemicals, our guts are going, no, I don't want this. So do you guys discuss things like that as well, or?
My family does, because I'm a nerd about it. The society as a whole, not really. Most people, in America anyway, most people who are aware of that are still considered health nuts, and so they're kind of considered to be like, taking things out of context or making a big deal about something when it's nothing. And so I think we as a society still have a long way to go to reverse the effects of the subsidization of our food, because it's a very long story, and I'm sure you've done research and read it yourself, but in a nutshell, we went through the Great Depression in America. A lot of people starved to death, and out of a genuine desire to help, scientists bred wheat that would be shorter, have a stronger stalk, and a much thicker grain head, so that they could feed more people. And that was a good thing to want to do, but they messed with the wheat and they changed the chromosome structure, and it just went from there. And now we have Monsanto that literally splices gene cells with Roundups, that way the wheat will be immune to weed killer, and then feeding it to people. You're literally eating toxins at this point. So the process of taking wheat from a plant to whatever kind of monster this is that we've made is what has created the need to be gluten-free. So society is still at the point where they think, oh, this is great, we have plenty of food now. And the medical industry is kind of ahead of the curve because they see the effects of it. But in order to educate the public, that's going to take another, probably as long as it took to get here. So that's like 30, 50, so 1930s is when the Depression happened. So it's going to take another 50, 60 years before we really educate people. And I think that obviously government played a big role in getting us here. I don't really see government playing a big role in getting us out. I think that it's much easier as a grassroots effort and for individual people to vote with their money basically and buy the things that they want to see, and then the market will respond and create the things that we want. So it's it's a very big subject and a lot of stuff to think about, but just individual people doing the best that they can is, I think, the way to go.
Yeah, definitely. I think you said some so many valid points, and thanks for giving like this. It was a really good in a nutshell, really, because I don't think many people understand the history behind what's happening with our food industry right now. And I think when you think about that, first when they Monsanto, when they first found out what a glyphosate and Roundup does, they start killing like all the pipes and killing absolutely everything around it, all the microorganisms, and they thought it was a good idea to spray on our food and put that inside our bodies, and our guts are pretty much, similar to what's happening on the ground. Like we've got little microbacteria, good bacteria, but, it's pretty much we're cleaning our pipe, but in the process, we're cleaning all our good bacteria as well.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, and people don't want to hear that. Like, it's much easier to, to buy, like you said, to go to the supermarket and feel like we've got this abundance of food. But yet I've read so many times that people that are overweight are actually, their bodies are malnutrition because, their actual cells
are not able to absorb it.
Exactly. And whatever they're putting inside it, it's not really nutrition. It's chemicals, it's other things other than proper nutrition. And I agree with you. I don't think the government is going to get us out of this, because somewhat they benefit from this as well. But I feel that each individual will, as we unfortunately, as we get sicker as a society, people are going to individually have to start making their own difference, around them, because,
it's up to individual people to take ownership and to take responsibility for their own selves. You can't put it off on government. You can't put it off on medicine. You can't put it off on the food industry. It is up to each individual person to make the best choices for themselves.
And I think the story of your family, it's a classical example, and it's amazing what you have done at such a, in such a young age as well. You guys suffered together for so long, and yet you were going from one doctor after another, but you were not getting answers. Because we think that, we are going to go to the doctor and we're going to get an answer. I haven't got an answer from any doctors why I got cancer. I had to find my own answers too. But, the suffering that your family had to go through for years and years and years. And it wasn't until you went to that class and that the teacher had gone through, what are the odds that the teacher had gone through such an extreme, story as your sister as well, right? She could have just said like, I found out that I was, but I was, sick, a bit sick, but she was as extreme as your sister. And then you realize, oh my God, this is the story of my sister. But if it wasn't for you to have gone there, God knows you could still be trying to find the answer. And we put so much trust on the, on the whole system. And, for me, it was very clear that, just turning after chemotherapy wasn't going to save me, and that's when I started taking ownership of my health. And it breaks my heart when people don't do that, because after you go through something, like that, now, like your sister, now she knows she's going to have to be gluten-free. It's a lifelong thing, it's a life commitment to her health, and for me, it's the same. I can't just go back and eating burgers and chips and drinking beer. After you had cancer,
yeah, this isn't something you do for a month and then you have a cheat day. There's no such thing as cheat days. This is now life.
It's a lifelong commitment to my health if I want to keep cancer away. So I think thanks for sharing that, because that's really really interesting as well, to give people some perspective if they want to understand a little bit more about it. So how do you what kind of people do you help? Like what is do they come to you? What kind of people mostly come to you? Have they gone to the doctors and didn't get a diagnosis and they're desperate, or how does that work?
I help a lot of people in different stages. So most of the people that I'm working with right now do have diagnosed celiac disease, but some of them are gluten sensitive or gluten intolerant. I think they're the same thing, but some people use different terms. Mostly, I find that I have gathered people at different stages. Some have been gluten-free for 6 to 8 months, some as long as 10 years, but they're still looking for ways to make it easier and find other people that can benefit from their expertise and that they can learn from. And so it's very, very much of a community of people just trying to help each other. I would like to help people that are just brand new starting out, because I know how scary it is to get this kind of a diagnosis and then just be left on your own to Google it. I'm in several different support groups, and I see people all the time. They're like, my doctor sent me this in an email. What does this mean? You know, he said, just go Google it and get some gluten-free stuff at the store. And like, there is way more to it than that. And these poor people are having to educate themselves, whether they want to or not, from the internet, which, as we all know, isn't always the most reliable source of information. So I want to be able to catch them right away and take them through it and make it as easy as possible. But I am here for anybody who needs me.
That's awesome. And what are the normal symptoms, if they are? Do you find that the symptoms are the same, like from when they get the diagnosis, or also when they are gluten sensitive, or is it the same kind of symptoms? Or
yes, a lot of the symptoms are very much the same. The only reason that they're classified differently is because celiac disease is an autoimmune response, but what it does to the body is pretty much the same. So most people identify the digestive symptoms first. So it's a lot of IBS and bloating and gas and diarrhea and constipation, sometimes at the same time, which is super weird, but it happens. And not being able to keep stuff down, a lot of vomiting, and not absorbing anything, and definitely malnutrition, acid reflux, and then those are like the things that when doctors do think to diagnose, those are the symptoms that they recognize. But there's a lot of weird skin rashes that come and go without explanation. My sister had a lot of trouble with impetigo, with like acne that erupts in toxin, and she still has scars on her face from, trying to get that out of her. And a lot of people who had celiac from birth have trouble with their teeth. Their teeth don't develop properly, and so they'll have a tooth that like grows way up here in the top of their gums, or just baby teeth that fall out and there's no adult teeth underneath. There's a lot of mental anxiety, panic attacks. My sister's adrenal gland has been so overworked for her whole life that it doesn't function normally anymore. One of the things that she had a lot of trouble with was the act of waking up would send her into a panic attack, because the body would just dump all the hormones at once, and it was complete overload. And then because the hormonal system is so out of whack, periods and cycles are messed up, sleep is messed up, insomnia. My sister called them brown dreams. They're like nightmares constantly. There's just so much mental and psychological effects to this as well. And I don't think I've heard many people talk about that aspect of it. So I definitely focus there in trying to help people know that they are not crazy. Their body is telling them something is wrong, but here's how to fix it.
I know. Wow, that's full on, isn't it? That to think that people are kind of living like that, and even with a fifth of those symptoms, it would be horrendous and hell to live like that, let alone a combination of them. And how? So what do you find is the biggest kind of obstacle for people? Like when they come to you and say, look, let's say, they've been diagnosed, or, they found out by themselves that they are gluten intolerant, and they say to you, look, I'm just trying to navigate through this new life. But what is the but? What is the obstacle that that you find that it's stopping them from getting rid of all of those symptoms?
I think that there's so many things that it's not really one thing. The but is, I think I'm going to die. The but is, I don't think I can do this. There's no way I can be a normal person and live like this. And so it's a combination of, what do I eat? How can I trust anything? You know, I can't ever go out to eat again. My family is going to give me hell every time we have to go out to eat or get together for any kind of family dinner. And, you know, my life as I know it is over. And so it's not really, this is what I want instead. Most people can't even think about what they want instead. They just are trying to survive.
Wow. Yeah, it's, you just don't realize, like I said, you know, your family was very supportive, but there will be people living with their family who are just going, you know, I mean, when I told my family I was going to stop to eat red meat and meat, and they still think, hi, I'm a little crazy, but that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you know, I'm quite I know I've been standing on my feet for way too long, and I'm quite a strong person. But if you're not, and if you're relying on that support group around you, that would be definitely hard as well. For you to, you know, to stand up for yourself and say, that's it, I'm not doing it. So you help them with planning their kind of meals and kind of giving them ideas and.
Yeah, I feel like, I mean, I'm down to share recipes. I think that there's a lot of good quality recipes out now. There's so many blogs and I mean, I'm a fairly good cook, but there's people who do that part much better than I do. So I am more than happy to share resources and other people who like to tinker in the kitchen more than I do. But I think that my specialty and the thing that I bring to the table is the understanding of the emotional and mental aspects and the relationship and the diplomacy and how to break it down so it's not so overwhelming, and really, really get the hang of explaining it and getting your family and friends on board so that way they understand. And there's just, I mean, we could talk for hours. There is so much involved in this because it's literally a lifestyle change. And I think the hardest thing is when people get a diagnosis and they're told they have to be this way, it feels like they've been victimized. It feels like this is happening to them. And so they don't have a choice, and they just feel like, well, my life is over, so why bother? And so my biggest thing is like helping them realize that their body has literally kept them alive. It has done everything possible to survive at all costs. And now it's their turn to stand up and say, I'm going to do what it takes to support my body in keeping me alive. And then once you get past I'm alive, then you have a chance to think about, well, what do I want to do with life? You know, you have to start one step at a time. And most people are not able to think about, what do I want to do with my life? You know, my sister was absolutely convinced she was going to die when she was 19. She did not make any plans on what she wanted to be when she grew up because she thought she was going to die. So now she has to think about, you know, I'm married, I'm going to have kids someday. What do I want to do with my life? You know, all of these things that most people just take for granted, that they're going to have an adult life. And my sister didn't.
Oh, that's so beautiful. It just gives me goosebumps when you say that, you know, that's the transformation you take people through, that, you know, our bodies, and I can say that for myself, my body has worked so hard to keep me alive. You know, my body has done so much for me. And during treatment, you know, I kind of felt, you know, a little bit that I was giving to my body every day. My body was, I could almost hear myself saying, thank you. You know, thank you for finally paying attention at me. Thank you for finally giving me some self-love. You know, thank you for finally showing up for me. And I think that is such a beautiful transformation. yeah, you stop definitely feeling a victim. You feel empowered actually to build that relationship with your body, and to, you know, to kind of start cultivating a bit of self-love.
Mhm.
And yeah, what you said about your sister not making plans, you know, like I remember reading a book, and you know, when you go through cancer, it's you know, the book said, you know, start writing down what you want to do for your life. And it was scary, you know, it was really scary for me to you know, to even think about, you know, will I be alive in 6 months time, you know, and what happened if I'm not, you know, what about my kids and what they're going to think, how they're going to live through, you know, 5 years old, 7 years old, 8 years old. And yeah, people definitely take that for granted, and people definitely you know, get busy with life, and take the, you know, most important thing to be grateful for, just to be alive, for granted. And you know, you know, as after going through cancer, that was, you know, one of the biggest gifts, you know, for me, to learn how to live fully the present moment, you know, like now, you know, like being here with you, you know, I feel blessed, and I feel that both of us are contributing to people hopefully be encouraged to live a healthier life, and value their bodies, and treat their bodies as a temple, and not take the little things in life for granted. So I'm so thankful that you are here, and your story is so beautiful. You are such a brave girl, lady.
Thank you.
I'm sure your family and your sister are very proud of you and of the work that you're doing.
I think so. They've always been very encouraging and supporting, so I'm very grateful for them and how much that they've stood behind me.
That's awesome. So now, what I will do is put your contact details underneath so people can contact you. And you know, if so, you know, if they have just been diagnosed, or potentially if they are just feeling, you know, some of those symptoms that we talked about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or
You
even
don't
if
have
they
to have
have
a
tried
diagnosis.
change.
My sister, yeah, my sister does not have an official diagnosis, but she knows for sure that this is the way she needs to be.
Awesome. And I feel that sometimes as well, people try making changes and they can't. And you know, it is very helpful to have somebody who understands, and you know, to take them through the journey, to help, you know, help them through as well. Such a, like I said, is a whole lifestyle change. It's not just about, oh, stop eating gluten. You know, it's a whole, there is a whole thing around it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's one of the things that I'm most proud of, is having been able to break that down into an actual process. So it's not just whatever life throws at you, it's an actual step by step. I think, is it AA that has like the 12-step program for getting over alcoholism? And you know, this is much more in depth, I feel like. Well, I've not been an alcoholic, so I don't know exactly how their program works, but it is actually a 12-step process for how to get through this transition and really thrive and not just survive.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Abigail. I will put your contact details below, and hopefully, you know, you can, lots of people will be contacting you so they can start living their life and start, you know, healing themselves and thriving.
Yes, I would love that.
Awesome. Take care.
Thank you so much.